Come gather round, brewers, and let the good doctor tell you a story. But first, let's grab a homebrew, of course. That means that you have to scoot, Chewy. Ooh, that was the Angel Share. This is what I call a cold brew beer. I will link to that one below in the description. I brew this with ANGG CY115, sponsor of today's video, and use their yeast nutrient Brew NutriSed. Check out that video. Cheers. What are you sipping on? Gorgeous. This is the story of Dr. Hans and the Night of the Living Wort. It was a cold and airy autumn evening deep in the Swedish forest. The tall trees swayed gently in the wind, their branches casting long shadows across the clearing. Dr. Hans stood alone in his brew shed, tucked away just behind the woods, where the only sound was the quiet hum of brewing equipment and the whisper of the wind through the trees. Tonight he was brewing his special Haunted Harvest Pumpkin Ale for Halloween, which you of course can download the recipe on my Buy Me a Beer page, or link down below. The warm smell of malt, cinnamon and nutmeg filled the shed as he stirred the wort, preparing for the final stages of the brew. With the boil nearly finished, he added the last ingredients, a dose of Angel yeast Brew NutriSed, to give the yeast the nutrients needed for a good healthy fermentation. After cooling the wort, Dr. Hans transferred to the fermenter, pitched his yeast, Angel yeast CY115 British Ale, and dialed in a spinning valve. He knew this strain would bring out the rich malty flavors of the pumpkin ale while keeping the fermentation clean and controlled with some fruity esters. Everything seemed to be going perfectly, but deep in the quiet of the forest, something felt different. As he sealed the fermenter and dialed in his spinning valve, the wind outside howled. And Dr. Hans paused for a moment. His eyes glanced at the small corner of the shed where he kept Tiggy's old bed. His late French bulldog had always loved hanging out in the shed during brew days, her bat-like ears perking up whenever the fermenter started hissing under pressure. A soft smile crossed his face. "Miss you, Tiggy," he whispered. But tonight there was no comfort in the familiar sound of brewing. The spinning valve hissed louder than usual. Too loud, almost like something was wrong. Later that night, Dr. Hans sat inside his cabin, the warmth of the fire glowing as he sipped a pint of lager. Chewy and Leia by his feet, content and unaware of the strange brewing process still fermenting under pressure in the shed. Everything seemed peaceful. But just as he took another sip, a strange chill creeped up his neck and he felt a presence near him. Then, barely a whisper, a familiar voice, soft and low, brushed against his ear. "Something's off, Dr. Hans." He froze, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. The voice, it was Tiggy's. Dr. Hans stood quickly, his heart pounding. Chewy and Leia suddenly perked up, their heads tilting at the faint hissing sound coming from the shed. Something was wrong. Grabbing his flashlight, Dr. Hans stepped outside in the cold night. The hissing grew louder with every step toward the brew shed, almost as if the fermentation itself was alive. Tiggy's whisper echoed in his mind. He heard it through the forest, the spinning valve hissing fiercely as the shed door creaked open. The sight before him made his heart race. There's someone at the door. Sorry, excuse me. Might be FedEx.
You suck! Like and subscribe. Our of course links down below to ANGG's brewing product page. We can check out the CY115, the Brew NutriSed, and all of the other brewing products.
Oh, whew. That was nice getting that out of me. Let's continue the story. Cheers. The fermenter shook violently, foam spewing from the spinning valve, hissing as pressure built inside. The fermenter itself seemed to swell, pulsing as something inside was struggling to escape. The wort was no longer just fermenting, it was alive. His mind raced. Wild yeast! Somewhere during the process, wild yeast from the depth of the Swedish forest must have snuck into his brew. Now they were trying to take over, competing with the yeast he had carefully chosen for the job. If the wild yeast won, they would ruin the entire batch. But Dr. Hans wasn't ready to give up just yet. He grabbed another pack of Angel Yeast CY115. If there was one thing he could rely on, it was the strength of this yeast. It had the reputation to be able to outcome the wildest of yeasts. And with the nutrients from Brew NutriZ already in place, it had a fighting chance to save his brew from the nasty invaders. His hands shook slightly as he ripped open the packet and pitched the yeast into the fermenter. For a moment, nothing happened. The wild yeast continued to bubble aggressively, roaring at Dr. Hans. The crowds and foaming over like monsters trying to escape. But then, slowly, the shaking began to ease. The hissing softened and the krausen, which had been foaming violently, started to pull back. The wild yeast, sensing defeat, recoiled, slithering back into the dark, retreating into the shadows. The CY115 yeast had taken control of the fermentation, pushing the wild yeast out of the fermenter, reclaiming the brew with every quiet hiss. The next morning, the brew shed was quiet. Dr. Hans approached the fermenter cautiously. The shed was dead quiet. He carefully drew a sample, already naturally carbonated thanks to the pressure fermentation. The rich aroma of the haunted harvest pumpkin ale filled the air as the sample poured out. The C115 had done its job. The wild yeast had been defeated and his beer was not only safe but had fermented out with a pleasant, inviting aroma. As he stood in the quiet shed, a gentle breeze blew through the open door. His eyes drifted once more to the corner where Tiggy's bed still sat, untouched. He could almost imagine her there, watching him with those big, curious eyes and a tongue sticking out. "Thanks, Tiggy," he whispered with a smile. "You always have my back." With a soft sigh, he jotted down a note in his brewing log. Wild yeast can be a real battle, but with the right yeast, you always have a fighting chance. Yeah, she was snoring. As Dr. Hans turned off the lights in the shed and stepped outside, the forest seemed eerily still. But just as he closed the door, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the distance. He paused, glancing towards the shadows of the trees. Somewhere out there, in the depths of the Swedish forest, the wild yeast still lurked, waiting for the next chance to invade his brews. With a knowing smile, Dr. Hans whispered, "Not tonight. Not tonight," before heading back to his cabin. The end. Or is it? This is a creepy stare.